This video is about adjectival clauses and the relative pronouns that are often used with them. We'll be going over three relative pronouns: which, who, and that. There are others, but these are the ones that people have the most trouble with. And we'll also be talking about how commas are used with this particular type of clause. First, a little bit of background just to review some things. An independent clause is a phrase that can stand on its own and can even be a complete sentence. So in this example, the dog is sleeping. It's an independent clause. It's also a complete sentence. On the other hand, dependent clauses cannot exist by themselves and express a lot of meaning. So the phrase which has spots doesn't work by itself. It has to be attached to something, like in this example here. The dog, which has spots, is sleeping. This one works. The particular type of dependent clause that we're talking about today is the adjectival clause. You'll notice that it's one of a few different types of dependent clauses, but this is all we're going to be focusing on here. And you'll also notice that the word adjectival looks a lot like the word adjective, and that's because they are in fact related. This type of dependent clause acts a lot like an adjective acts. If you'll remember that an adjective modifies a noun, it gives you more information about it. That's what adjectival clauses do. It modifies the noun and gives you a little bit more information. So we have the dog is sleeping, but now we know that the dog also has spots. Okay, so now that background information is established, we can get into some more interesting things. First, let's just clear up some space. We're going to come back to the dog in a minute, but let's start with something else. Let's go to talk about the word who. You'll notice here that in these two sentences, the words are identical. The only real difference is that this first one has commas surrounding the dependent clause, and the second sentence does not have commas. That's the only real difference in the text. But what about the meaning? Well, let's talk about the first sentence here first. The man, comma, who wears a blue shirt, comma, likes cheese. If we were to take out this adjectival clause and say the man likes cheese, well, there's only one man here, and so the meaning wouldn't really change. We'd still know which person likes cheese, and that's the man that's standing there. And we get some extra information about him, knowing that he wears a blue shirt. This second example, though, we have a group of people. Imagine a group of three men, and somebody were to say, the man likes cheese. Well, you wouldn't know which person you're talking about, and so you have to give a little bit more information for the sentence to make sense in that context. So then you would say, the man who wears a blue shirt likes cheese. So we're specifying which person that is. And in this case, the adjectival clause is necessary for meaning. Some people like to call this distinction restrictive and non-restrictive clauses. Restrictive clauses, they are essential to meaning, so they are required for things to make sense. Non-restrictive clauses, they're not essential to meaning. If you were to remove them, you would still be able to understand the sentence in the context that it was used. You'll notice that our non-restrictive clauses get commas. So if you see commas here, it indicates that what's in between them is not essential for meaning if it's an adjectival clause. And if there are no commas, then it's a restrictive clause and it is essential to meaning. Also, it's important to know that the word who, the relative pronoun who, can be used in either non-restrictive or restrictive clauses. And also, who is only used with people. If I'm talking about my table, I'm not going to say my table who has 4 legs. That just sounds strange. Who only works with humans. So let's move on to two other relative pronouns, which and that. Let's start with which. Here we are again with our dog example. The dog, which has spots, is sleeping. You'll see this looks just like the man who likes cheese, or if you take out this adjectival clause here and say the dog is sleeping, we know which dog we're talking about. There's only one of them. If we go to this other example here and say the dog is sleeping, we don't know who we're talking about. There are 3 dogs. We have to specify. You have to say the dog which has spots is sleeping. But here's where it gets a little bit difficult. Some people say that using which for restrictive clauses is not acceptable for formal writing. And so this works in casual writing, this works in speech. You might notice that I've said this during this video in a restrictive sense, but it does not work for formal writing according to some people. Well, some of these people who think this are editors and the people who will be grading your papers, and so it's safest just to stay away from using which in restrictive clauses when doing formal writing. So it works well for non-restrictive clauses. It works with non-people, so dogs, tables, chairs. But in formal English, you might want to avoid it for restrictive clauses. So then what are you supposed to use for restrictive clauses that are not talking about people? We get the word that. In spoken English, this is pretty interchangeable, saying the dog which has spots or the dog that has spots. It means something identical, but when you're writing something formal, use the word that. Everybody agrees that this is a correct word to be using with restrictive clauses. So remember that it works with restrictive clauses and it works with non-people. I'm going to put all the examples up here so you can see them all at once, and there you go.